what might be the biggest game of the regular season in the Big Ten. Number 2 versus number 3, Ohio State at Oregon at 7:30 on NBC. I'm Stephen Means. That's Andrew Gillis. That's Stefan Krajisnik. It's time for our game time decisions. This is a thing that we think will impact who could win the game. The one thing we want to see in this game. Andrew, we're going to let you go first here. What you looking for?
So I'm basically making my duty this week to make Ohio State and Oregon fan bases very upset. So I can't wait for the Oregon fans to find this. I think if Ohio State runs the ball effectively, I'm talking 5+ yards a carry with Quinshawn and Travion, I think Oregon might get run out of the stadium, because one of the things that makes Ohio State so unique, especially as compared to last year, was, we were talking about the Notre Dame game and the Penn State game right before we hopped on this video with some of the other reporters, and it was like, yeah, but they couldn't run the ball last year against those teams. And that's why the Penn State game was kind of close. And that's why the Notre Dame game came down to the last play, because Ohio State had great receivers, but they didn't have that secondary counter punch. And this year they do, and it might be one of the best counter punches in the country. And honestly, the run game might be their bread and butter compared to the pass game, which, imagine saying that a couple of months ago. So if Ohio State runs the ball effectively, I really have a hard time seeing what Oregon does to slow down Ohio State's passing attack, because Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate, they're great. And Jabbar Muhammad's awesome, and they have a really good corner. I don't know how they stack up depth-wise, and I don't know how they stack up in that regard. So if Ohio State's offensive line gets a push against Oregon's defensive line, which is very talented, which is a very, very good defensive line, if you get a run game push, pair that with the fact that when we saw Ohio State's offense against Iowa, when they're clicking, the ball's coming out, RPOs, you're freezing the defense, you're making them think for a half a beat. If you do that and you're throwing the ball effectively with Will Howard, then you add in that run game, I'm having trouble seeing how Ohio State doesn't run away with this one, literally, figuratively, and literally, if they run the ball well. So if Ohio State gets the ground game going and gets it going to a level that we've seen in these first couple of games, we might have our game stories written by the third quarter.
That's interesting. We're going to talk about that on Buckeye Talk. What he's talking about, Stefan, kind of flows into what you're looking for here, because if they're establishing the run and now they're able to throw the ball, then it comes down to pass pro.
Yeah, and I still think, and I agree with Andrew, that I think Ohio State's going to have success running the ball. You and I talked about it on Buckeye Talk when we were previewing the game a bit. But at the same time, when it's number 2 versus number 3, I struggle to think that there won't be a third and medium situation where Will Howard's going to have to make a throw. And can he have protection for that throw? And I think the biggest thing is Jordan Birch, defensive end for Oregon, going up against Josh Fryer, Ohio State's right tackle. Can Josh win those battles more often than not? Can he give Will Howard a chance to make that big throw? Or is Birch going to show, why he's considered one of the best defensive ends in the country in the Big Ten, right? I think that's a huge matchup in this game. Keeping Will Howard upright is big, even if the running game is successful. And I think specifically that matchup, you talked about Birch as a game record. They haven't really faced a guy like that yet this year. Those are the situations. 3rd and 5. Is he going to blow up a play? Now Ohio State's having a punt, or it's a strip sack, or Will Howard has to make a throw and it gets picked off. That matchup is going to be huge in those pivotal situations and could determine which way this game goes.
So I'm going to go on the defensive side. I think both of those things, those are probably what are going to decide the game from Ohio State's standpoint. I think defensively, typically when you're having a conversation about defensive backs versus wide receivers, you're talking about downfield coverage. And when you look at the targets at the end of the game, how many times did the wide receiver win? How many times did the cornerback win? That's not necessarily how this game is going to go. I don't know how often Oregon is going to push the ball down the field where they're not being forced to because it's 3rd and long. That's not what they want to do. They want to get the ball out of their hands of Dillon Gabriel quickly and into the hands of these wide receivers and then ask them to make plays. I said a stat earlier this week. I think that might have been on the Monday pod where I was talking about the fact that Tez Johnson, Oregon's leading receiver, 80% of his yards are after the catch right now. So it's more about tackling. It's more about staying disciplined. It's more about picking your spots to be aggressive. We've seen that with Denzel Burke. He's picked sometimes to be aggressive, and it's led to an interception. He's also had some times this year where he's tried to be aggressive, and it's ended up in a 7-yard gain. Now, it was a 7-yard gain because of who you're playing. It might be a 17-yard gain because you're playing Oregon this time around. But how does that go about it? I was asking different defensive backs just what the emphasis has been. Reading your keys, being disciplined, picking your spots at the right time. And also, I know we've talked a lot about Ohio State playing off coverage, and you do that against Iowa because it's Iowa, they're not going to challenge you down the field, so you're okay with your cornerbacks doing that. I think them playing off coverage today on Saturday makes sense. Because it's not about downfield coverage. It's about, can your cornerbacks make tackles? And I think Davison, Igbinosun, Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock have proven they can make tackles. And we see what Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs are as safety. So I think that's where the game starts. Can Ohio State stifle Oregon's game plan simply because the main thing Oregon wants to do, they can't do it anymore because they're getting 2-yard gains because these cornerbacks are wrapping up in coverage and they're making tackles at the line of scrimmage. That's our game time decisions. Big game. Big game time decision. Ohio State, Oregon on Saturday, 7:30. Get the text 614-350-3315. I'm Steven. That's Andrew. That's Stefan. We'll talk to you guys after the game.